Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing into today. And thank you. Welcome for being here. You are here for a great conversation with my colleagues to talk about failure and resilience and perseverance in STEM. First, we want to thank our sponsor for today, the Bossier Parish Community College Center for Teaching and Learning, to Monica Lawrence and the grant that she received for some women in STEM programming and for inviting us to lead that for her. My name is Megan Pollock. I am going to be the moderator for today's conversation, and I am the founder of Engineer Inclusion. And Engineer Inclusion is the organization that's helping to facilitate these conversations for the series that you're participating in. And I have the pleasure of getting to work with organizations and companies and educational institutions across the globe to intentionally and systematically engineer equity and inclusion into their organizations. And so I am also based in a small town in Southeast Texas. And also, you're going to be receiving some support today from Elizabeth Johnson. She's the communications manager for Engineer Inclusion, and she's based out of Little Rock. And she's going to be sort of managing the chat today. So if you have any trouble, then please ask for help for some help from her. She's also our social media champion who's helped to spread the word for today's event. And so if you need anything, please let us know through her. Now I get to introduce you to our panelists. So you can read the full bios of our amazing panelists on the webpage, which is how you probably found us and how you registered. But I'm going to start first with Lundy, with Chauncey Lundy. So she is a friend from my very early days of engineering with Texas Instruments. And Chauncey Lundy, she is an engineer turned media mogul, and she is a philanthropic leader. And so from founding the trailblazing Inspire Green to spearheading Lundy Legacy Incorporated, Chauncey is the epitome of resilience in action. She's not just a voice in the environmental sector, she's a beacon of joy and liberation, teaching us that every setback is a setup for a comeback. Next, meet Julie Tan, a chemical engineering virtuoso with over a quarter century at Dow Incorporated, navigating the complex terrains of pharmaceuticals to automotive innovations. As a 2014 Step Ahead awardee and Change Management Pro, Julie's journey is a masterclass in turning challenges into stepping stones. Her dedication to nurturing the next STEM generation outside the office just showcases the power of perseverance and passion. Next, introducing Lauren Horton, a cybersecurity whiz fresh from university with a promising knack for leading in the digital frontier at Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. Beyond her technical prowess, Lauren's zest for life, from globetrotting to gourmet bread making, mirrors her approach to STEM, innovative, relentless, and always forward-looking. Her story is a testament to how embracing failure and cultivating resilience can unlock extraordinary achievements. And last but not least, Mary Long, a strategic thinker, problem solver, and guiding light for those navigating the complexities of engineering and business. Mary's extensive experience across water, telecom, and energy sectors exemplifies her ability to transform chaos into clarity. Her commitment to lifelong learning and helping others find their path underscores the essence of this panel. Resilience is not just about enduring, but thriving through the twists and turns of STEM careers. Now, I want to give you a little bit of what to expect today. So we're going to have the front part of the hour are going to be questions for our panelists. I've got a couple of Slido polls for audience engagement to set us up. And then in the end, then about a quarter till, we're going to go directly to audience questions. And I want you to use Slido, and I'm going to give you the QR code here in a second, where you can submit, and it allows you to upvote. At the end, we'll sort of close and think about the next steps and our actions, our key takeaways, and then we'll end about the hour. If you're new to ever using Slido, it's a fairly simple tool that you can use. You can either go straight to your browser, or if you have a smartphone, you can just hover over the QR code. And this is the same QR code that we're going to use throughout the hour. So you don't have to keep scanning the QR code. And so you can type the QA, your questions there, and then upvote, as you can see in the little GIF there. Now, here's the direct link to join, and then you'll see that in the corner of all of the Slido polls. And so we want to get to know you a little bit, and if you'll take an opportunity to scan the QR code And let us know which of the following on this list best describes you. If none of them describe you in any capacity, then I encourage you to select other and then share with us in the chat what best describes you. And this is helpful to us so that we can tailor our responses to best meet the needs of the audience. All right, so thanks so much. We've got a few industry professionals, some educators. So far, we have 5 people who participated. Um, we've got 20 of us on the call so far. So hopefully we get a little bit more participation. But we don't want to wait too long and burn our time. Okay, so we got educator. We'll wait just a few more seconds while people do that. So again, one of the things that's sort of interesting about the topic that we've chosen is that there's 2 ways that we can go about the conversation. The first is to talk, specifically about resilience, dealing with failure and perseverance as a STEM innovator. And then the second is dealing with the sort of perseverance and failure that we experience in our careers. And so we're curious to hear from you in the audience about which of those is most interesting to you. So in the first panel of the series, we focused mostly on the STEM innovation element, but I got a sense from the questions that people were more, they had questions about people's careers. So we wanted to give you a chance to just contribute to see which is most interesting to you. So it looks like we've got majorities asking for a balanced mixed, a third are hearing stories about failure and perseverance related to STEM careers. So we will strive for a balanced mixed so that we make sure that we get a mixture of both. So to our panelists, take this as a tip and how you're responding to sort of fold in both as you're engaging in our questions. So let's dive in to the first question. So my first question to the panel is, what role does failure play in driving innovation and discovery in STEM fields? And I want to go ahead and direct this first to Mary. So Mary, tell us, what do you think? What does failure matter, and why? How does it drive innovation and discovery in STEM?
Failure matters because if you aren't pushing the limits, you don't know where you might go with it. So a lot of it is finding a place where it is safe to explore and try new things and make small bets and see if doing certain things one way or another way can help drive innovation or try to solve a problem. So if there's an existing problem and you've tried a couple different things that don't work, but it's still a problem, you should be able to keep trying different things until you find something that will work to resolve whatever the problem might be.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Julie, what do you think?
Sure. So especially speaking to all the educators that are on the phone, you're all teaching your students about the engineering design process, and that is failure is really at the core of that, right? The whole engineering design process is we try something and it doesn't work. So we go make some changes and we try it again, and we keep that process going until we find that right solution. So, failure is a core part of what we are doing in our engineering careers. And honestly, we learn more from the things that don't work than we do from that time when we got lucky and it just happened to work. So I think it's just really, it's integral to everything that we do, and learning to be comfortable with that is really important.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Lauren, what are you thinking?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was that episode of Mythbusters where they crashed 2 semis into each other and it spelled out failure is always an option. And that has been really core to my engineering career, is just realizing that at the end of the day, failure is, again, to Julie's point and to Mary's point, it's how you grow. You don't learn if you don't make mistakes. If you aren't challenged by something, it may not be able to change you. And if change is the goal, which it should be, because there's always something better to strive for, then we need to seek out those failure points, those uncomfortable zones where we can actually learn and grow.
Yeah, yeah, and it's important to describe the failure that we're talking about. We're not talking about failing bridges. We're not talking about failing, heart devices. All the failure that happens in those materials and testing those things, hopefully before we get to the sort of implementation of things, right? And I remember when I was a baby engineer and doing my master's thesis research at Texas Instruments, the whole thing was actually about failing. I was trying to kill the devices I was working on. And it was a tremendous cognitive dissonance because for all of my education, it was not about failure, right? But then my whole study was trying to kill those devices so that we could learn how they won't die once they're in the devices later on. And so it is really important that we teach students to embrace failure and teach people to understand that failure is how we learn and how we keep things from failing once they are in those sort of final applications. So next, the question for the panel is thinking about a personal example or a specific example of when perseverance was critical to reaching success on a project. And I'm going to direct this question to Julie first.
Yeah, I have a real life example here. It's a career example that really resonates with me when I think about this. So in 2008, 2009 timeframe, I was working in our automotive division, and I was designing and building a brake fluids plant. And when we first authorized this project, the economics were great, right? This was going to be a slam dunk. We were an OEM supplier to major auto manufacturers, and this plant was going to be a fantastic opportunity for us. For those of you who maybe remember what it was like around late 2008, 2009, we hit a major recession in the US, and our two major customers, GM and Chrysler, both declared bankruptcy during this time. So by the time we were actually constructing, we were in a recession and the economics were getting worse and worse. But we were so far along in the process, we continued, we built the plant. By the time we started up the plant, I now had a beautiful new brake fluids plant ready to make brake fluid, and a market that was absolutely in the garbage in terms of where to sell it to. The business was distraught. They were ready to mothball us. They were like, maybe we just need to mothball the plant and just write this one off. But we were excited because we had built the plant, and it was a small group of us, and we said, give us a chance, let us try and run this. And so we really had to get innovative, and we had to figure out how we could run this plant for, the least amount of money possible, right? How could we be very lean and very intentional about how we operated this plant so that we could shave those margins as small as possible? And ultimately, we worked very closely with our supply chain. We worked very closely with our commercial team, and we figured out how to find that new business that we didn't have, the automotive manufacturers that were still running. We ended up making race car brake fluid, and we actually commercialized some transformer oil into one of the assets that wasn't even part of the original scope of the project. But what this took was a lot of innovation and perseverance to actually get a functional and operational and profitable plant in the end.
Thanks so much for sharing that really detailed story. I think many of us from the industry remember the years of 08, 09, and the sort of how that affected many of us in the engineering field. Any other panelists want to add to this question around perseverance was critical to reaching success on a project? All right, well, we'll go ahead and move to question 3. So next up, I want to ask the panelists, and we can start with Lauren on this. So Lauren, how can embracing failure positively impact a team's dynamics and creativity?
If I can hit the unmute button. Well, so my personal experience has been failure equals freedom. So in that sense, when you take off the blinders of, oh, I can't ever fail, then that allows you to just put it all out on the table, and the entire team can come together and just, throw out every single idea that they have. Just pretend failure doesn't exist. And then we go and try a couple of things. We, sort out which ones we want to try first, prioritize. But then recognizing that whenever we do come up against a wall, that is not a bad thing. It is just time to grab another idea from the pile and try again, or see how far the first idea did work, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that first failure. And so the positive impact here is that there is a lot of freedom of creativity and just having the ability to go, you know what, it doesn't matter, and to let yourself really kind of, I don't want to spit the slide back to you, but I mean, embrace failure. It's that idea of nothing is bad when it comes to trying out something that hasn't been done before. I mean, that's innovation, right? There is no precedence. You have to create the precedence. And so there's freedom in that.
Chauncey, I see that you're flashing a heart there. What are you thinking?
I'm actually agreeing. I think that, when you fail, when a team fails, you can no ideas off the table. Then you can throw everything. You can strategize a lot better. And sometimes when there are team members who may not be as engaged, failing actually makes them more engaged because people don't like to lose. But if all of the pressure is on a few team members who are coming up with ideas and actually trying to make things work, people sometimes aren't as engaged. But when something fails and their name is tied to it, then they are actually a lot more engaged and they come up with more ideas and more creativity. I just think I agree with Lauren that it gives you more freedom and the ability. It just improves the process. You can improve each iteration of what you're doing.
Yeah, and so when we connect this to what the literature tells us, that when we embrace failure, we're actually creating a culture of psychological safety, right? So people feel safe to make mistakes. And when people can experience high levels of psychological safety, which is a core human need, they experience greater feelings of belongingness. And then guess what? All of these things lead to greater results and the outcomes that we want. And so, this is just a key point to like recognizing that if we aren't embracing failure positively, then we are shuttering the potential of our teams to reach their fullest potential and ultimately that creativity. So the next question I have for the panel is, can you share a personal work experience where you faced failure and you worked to overcome it? And so I think Lauren wanted to start with this one, and then I'd like to invite some of the other panelists to share some of their personal stories as well.
Yeah, so actually this story, I had another story in mind, and then something happened this weekend as I was coming home from a work trip, and I was like, well, actually this makes the point a lot better, I think. I ended up losing track of my work phone while coming home from a work trip. And so, I mean, that was probably this is like my second work trip ever. Again, I'm very new to the industry. And so my heart just sank. I mean, I was in tears. I called my mom and I was like, I don't know what to do. And she said, you did the right thing, first of all, to find somebody that's going to help you just calm down and breathe. Because then once you can breathe through the situation, we can actually start to fix the situation. And so she helped calm me down. And then I just went straight to my manager first thing. And I said, hey, this is me being 100% honest. I'm going to do whatever it takes to, whatever the policies are for reporting this and following through. I have torn apart the bag that I have, the suitcase. It's nowhere I can be found. Just did a lot of backtracking. So there was a lot of personal accountability there. And then there was also following up with my manager. And yes, I like it. It's a very scary thing to do, to have to go, something, company property that you've entrusted me with is now misplaced. That's, it feels very negligent. But my boss has been extremely supportive. And every single time that there's been a question that I've had, she's always made me feel so very comfortable just coming to her. And so while yes, I know that is a unique experience to have a manager who is so responsive and open to that kind of conversation and fosters that sort of communication, there's still a lot to be learned of. There are going to be hard things that you're going to have to do, and you have to own the consequences of your actions. And so it doesn't matter whether that action is a positive thing or a negative thing. you have to own up to it. And so I think the first thing there that is really important is, are you willing to take personal accountability for your life, let alone your work life? Because if you aren't willing to face the failure in your own self, then how can you ask others to face that for you or with you? And so, I mean, the whole situation's been resolved, it's been taken care of. Everybody's been like, oh yeah, that happens all the time. You're so not the first person in the world. And that was my other takeaway from this experience is there's nothing new under the sun. You are not the first person to fail, and you certainly will never be the last person to fail. And that kind of sounds callous, but again, there's a sort of relief in that of, I don't have to have all the answers because not everybody does. And the whole point is that we're trying to find the answer together. So
Thanks so much, Lauren. So what I'm taking away is, one, take a deep breath. Two, ask for help. Three, be accountable and be transparent with your leaders. And then the sort of fifth thing is like, sometimes not everything, getting some perspective to realize like not everything is maybe as big as we might think it might be. Any of the other panelists want to add, again, a personal work experience where you faced failure and then you worked to overcome it?
I can. Back in my consultant days, I was working on a project, actually designing, planning and designing bike lanes in a community, and working on the infrastructure side. Sometimes when you're doing projects, they're so real for people, like immediately, like somebody builds a roadway through it, like people can get upset, and there was a lot of community resentment around what people felt like bike lanes represented. And as they thought it was a sign of gentrification, people being pushed out. And there was a meeting that our team had that got so bad at a library that the police had to the library police had to shut it down. I didn't even know there were police at the library police, but whatever. They had to shut down the meeting, and we took it as a sign. It's a project that the mayor at the time in Washington, D.C. really, really wanted this project. We thought that there was strong some community support, and that there was like a lot of opposition from people in the community, churches and other institutions about what these bike lanes represented and what it meant. And so our team really took it hard because we thought that, we were having this meeting to get some input on design and where things would be. But we tried again. And what we did this time was, one, take in all of the feedback that we received from the community. And we had another meeting in a way that it was more of a listening session, kind of listening to what people said. And what happened in that listening session is people who people didn't think of as traditional cyclists actually came out to support, because what we found out was there were a lot of shift workers who couldn't take public transportation during standard hours, who were using bike lanes. That was their only mode of transportation at 4:30 in the morning, or when they got off late at night, was being able to ride their bikes home. We found out there was a whole underground community of people like, I can't afford a car, and so this is how I get around. So whereas people thought of this as something that was for more affluent community members, they were able to find out that there were people who this was a necessity for, and how they actually felt unprotected just riding in the street alone with cars. And they wanted something that they felt a little bit safer. So I think for us, like, just not giving up, and actually listening, giving an opportunity for more people to weigh in, actually resulted in something that was a lot better for us for the project. And now the bike lanes exist now within that particular area.
Thanks so much, Chauncey. So let's continue with your thoughts here. So how do you maintain motivation and perseverance in the face of setbacks in your STEM career? So maybe not necessarily thinking about just the job, but now sort of pivoting and talking a little bit about the career trajectory.
Megan, I can start that one.
Okay.
I think it's about perspective. I think if you go into your career understanding that things are going to happen, right? And if you bring that perspective with you and understand that sometimes you're going to have setbacks, sometimes you may not get the promotion you wanted or the job you wanted, but see every opportunity as just that, an opportunity to learn. Just like, going back to your engineering design process, right? Your career is like a big project, right? If every time you didn't get that promotion or you didn't get that project that you wanted to work on, if you see that as an opportunity for whether it's personal growth or professional growth or networking, I think it gives you that perspective and just makes it a little bit easier to deal with those setbacks.
Thanks, Julie. Lauren, what are you thinking? And then Mary.
So this reminds me of some of the conversations you and I have had over the years, Megan, of just what do you want to do with your life, with your career? How do you want to set it up? What's the trajectory you want to take? And through that helped me realize that I don't want a career in a traditional sense. What I want is opportunities. I want opportunities to thrive. I want opportunities to try something new. In my interview for Lockheed Martin, one of the things I said was, I'm ready to drink from a fire hose. I want to drink from a fire hose because I got nothing else right now. I don't have any commitments on my time. I don't have kids. I don't have pets. Like, I'm so ready and eager to learn. Let me have it all. But in saying that, I also recognize that there's going to be a lot going to hit me all at one time. And so I'm going to have to learn how to balance that. I'm going to have to learn how to manage my time, how to be an effective in whatever role I am, whatever kind of facet I am fulfilling. I need to make sure that it's not shifting things in a detrimental way. So recognizing where shifts can occur and allowing that to shift so that I can make room for other opportunities. It's all a balance. And one of the best things I ever learned in college was it's not 0 to 100. And so some days are going to be 70 miles an hour, and that's going to be awesome. And then the next day might be back down to 20, and that's okay too. You don't immediately jump from 0 to 100. You take it day by day, and you take it with what you have when you have it, and you make it work.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Appreciate what you said. I think it's also really wonderful to have such a breadth of experience in this conversation, right? We've got somebody who's just at the very beginning of the career. We've got people who are, big leaders in their companies. So I think that gives us a really fresh perspective. Now, Mary, I noticed you unmuted. What did you want to add to this conversation around maintaining motivation and perseverance in the face of setbacks?
I think for me, having had a few motivation or setbacks along the way, is that initially it was, you don't know any better, so you keep going. And until you've had more setbacks, you have to figure out if that's something that causes you to change your trajectory or be open to new opportunities, where I ended up going from a career in water wastewater, where my earlier thoughts when I was graduating from college was, I want to, save the world and make it a little bit better place by improving the water quality and things in the communities that I worked with and served. And that grew into being involved in a large program. And then things happened, and I ended up going from water wastewater to a totally new flavor of engineering and telecommunications. And that's where you're learning things new on the job, because no one has done it before, because they keep evolving with technology. And finding the common threads in between with project, program, construction management helped me persevere in my engineering career in a totally different direction than where I anticipated. And then being laid off several years later gave me an opportunity to reflect, where do I want to go from here, coming back to my original goals to leave the world a little bit better place. And what does that look like for me? What aspects of engineering, because that can cover a wide gamut of things. And then it got into our water wastewater, but then it got into energy and seeing how we could change that along the way. So one of the things is, you don't know any different, or you don't have the opportunity to fail and sit back and eat bonbons until the next opportunity comes up. If you're the main breadwinner for your family, you have to keep going or find a way to make that work for you, whatever that looks like.
Oh, Mary, that makes me chuckle. My favorite 7th grade teacher, Mr. Walker, would always tell us that sit back and eat bonbons. And I had to go home and ask Mom, what's a bonbon? But now I know. Yeah, so I think also one of the things that's important to recognize for people wherever they are in their career is this notion that our careers are not linear. We somehow we make an assumption that they're going to be linear when we start out in life. But I had a great mentor when I was working for DLP and Texas Instruments who like drew out a map, and I was trying to find an image of that I designed before. But you start here and you've got 5 different potential destinations that you could be, and you've got lots of different ways of getting there, right? And so maintaining that perspective, and realizing that there's more than one way to get to the end result that you want, but also recognizing that, in the face of these setbacks, you might learn something about yourself and what it is that you want in the end. So with that, I want to switch to the next question. And that question is, how can educators and mentors better prepare students for the inevitability of failure in STEM? Now, before I get the panelists to respond here, I want to encourage everyone to make sure that you're contributing to the Slido so that you can ask your questions and then you can upvote and rank there. So grab some write a question on there. You can ask a question specific to one of the panelists, or to all of the panelists, but that will help make sure that we've got your input and contributing to the rest of the conversation. So let's go back to the prompt here. So I think, let's see, Chauncey, why don't you start us out here? How can educators and mentors better prepare students for the inevitability of failure in STEM?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I don't think I was prepared, like even from a college perspective of what it was going to take to be in a STEM field. And I think starting with being truthful about what it takes, not in a way to discourage, but actually to help uplift and to build, and letting people know at the outset that, there may be some classes that are going to be a bit challenging, and you may not be able to breeze through this like you did high school. You're going to take some hours, a lot of hours for one class, that you may have a math problem that takes up 4 pages, and that's just one question. Just trying to be really sharing your experiences and being more truthful. I think that then people can build a better support system for themselves, and they can have that support going in. Having went from a science, even me, my bachelor's degree is in environmental science, but my master's degree in engineering. Those are 2 totally different. They're alike and different in many, many ways. And because I didn't have an undergraduate degree in engineering, I had to take all of those weed out classes that sophomores usually take at school. I had to, as they call all of those hard classes, I had to take all of those as prerequisites. And I was in class with sophomores, and I was a graduate student, and I was struggling because I was like, oh, I didn't know that these classes were like this. I could do chemistry almost with my hands closed, but thermodynamics is that was a different animal for me. So and I often share when I'm talking to students, sometimes they're talking about classes and how they're hard. I was like, yeah, I dropped that twice. People see where you are now, and they don't know the story that got you to where you are now. They see, like, because at the end of it all, I have a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering. It looks good on the bio, right? But people don't know what that journey was like for me to get that on that bio, when I made the lowest grade I ever made on a test in my entire life in school, and just was like, oh, should I keep going? And then other people was like, oh, that's normal. That's everybody when you're staying up late at night to study. But even when you think about that, even going into the career aspect, letting people know, what it looks like to be in a STEM career, particularly as someone, as a Black woman, that there aren't going to be other people who look like you, that there aren't going to be a lot of other people who look like you, even as a woman in general, and like what that looks like, and how you persevere, how you command the room, like how you endure in the face of sometimes people who don't think that you should be in this space, or that you don't deserve to be where you are. So I think that it's very important to share those stories and be honest about it, but letting people know what's also on the other side, and how you can focus on the recovery when you do fail. Like, yes, I didn't pass that test. Yes, I had to drop that class, but this is how I recovered. I spent more office hours. I did more, got more tutoring. I did all of the things. I got with more students, and even in the corporate world, or even in being in having my own consulting firm, these are the steps that I took, after something didn't go right, being able to share those experiences and setting what those expectations are, I think to me are key. Really just letting people know that, as you were just talking about, it's not linear. There were things that were up and down, and sometimes I had to circle back around. Again, how can I be making A's in these graduate level classes, but I'm making doggone it, I'm not doing as well in these other classes, and feeling really ashamed about that. Like, how is this even possible? Like, how can I, and then having to persevere through that, I think was challenging, but having people around me just who could tell me that I can do this. I didn't know the expectations, but having people around me who were willing to help me to do things I hadn't done before. I had never had to go sit in anybody's office hours and get help, so doing that was like, okay, this is just a normal part of life, so I think that all of those things can help you, being really truthful about who you are, what the journey is, and sharing some tips with how people can recover from those mistakes so that they're better prepared.
I just like to add a couple things as well. I think those are all great examples, right? And I think if we can be intentional about building some of these situations into our education, whether it's our education at a university or even in elementary school, but also our education in our companies. So one of the places where I work in Dow is in our operations, learning, and talent development space. And so this is the learning that we provide for our operations employees, which includes our new engineers. And for a number of years, we had a simulation that our new engineers would go through. And in this simulation, they would be put into groups, and they would be tasked to run sort of this virtual factory. And we didn't tell them this, but they were absolutely 100% set up to fail. The way the simulation ran, there was no way you were going to make money in your first year with your hypothetical factory. And it was humbling to them, right? Because we all work for companies. We don't hire the bottom of the class. We hire the best, right? And everybody knows that. Everybody that gets hired knows that they are the best, or they certainly feel like they are. So it was a bit of a humbling experience for them to have that opportunity to essentially fail in a safe space. And then continuing with that idea of what can you do with that failure as they learn from it, right? So after your first hypothetical year with the company, you got to make some changes, and the next year you got a little bit better, and we would do a couple of rounds of this simulation so that they could learn how to overcome failure and get better from it. And so I think that the more that we can build those types of things into our education, the better we prepare our STEM professionals for those types of situations.
And it might be as a mentor talking about it and showing that you're not the expert, but you're going to help somebody else figure something out along the way. As Shansei was talking about, there's certain classes that, many of us are very intelligent, went to school and didn't have to do a lot of studying, a lot of homework, a lot of the struggle to get through certain classes as much as another student might for a particular topic. But whatever you have along the way, there's going to be places that you have a better understanding from how the teacher presents information, or they may not, or maybe certain topics that are outside of your wheelhouse or your areas of expertise and interest. When I was talking to one of my friends about this panel, he mentioned that I helped get him through engineering, and I don't think that I did that much differently, but we were study buddies for a couple different courses that were more outside of our wheelhouse, and just helping each other studying and making a commitment to do that and dig into that material together made it easier to let us both pass and become the awesome people we are today. So.
Yeah, so what I hear and what all of you are saying is that there's really an importance for failures to be more openly discussed and normalized within the academic and professional communities. So I want to sort of interject an unplanned question here, but how can we do that? And what ways would you recommend that we do that in our professional communities? Lauren, I see you've unmuted. What are you thinking?
So that actually led right into what I really wanted to say, which was, as fresh as I am, I think I have a pretty good perspective to offer here. I don't know what I don't know. And so the best interactions I had with my professors were when they volunteered information, where they just happened to notice I was doing X, Y, or Z. I don't even remember what it was. It's happened so often, but they would go, Lauren, you don't have to do it that way. You know that there's this resource over here, or Lauren, this is over here. In fact, I was asked to be on the student advisory panel for the libraries at SMU because that I kept going, hey, I didn't know this resource existed. How can we tell other people about it? How can we tell other students? Because a lot of times, and I typically find that this is very typical in women, we tend to internalize a lot more. We tend to just go, oh, I guess that's just normal that everybody struggles in this way. Or like, oh, I guess, if I didn't get it on the first try, like, that's just me, I guess, And so we don't realize that there is a problem that exists because we don't know enough about what we don't know. And so that would be my number one recommendation is remember that these students haven't had all the experiences that you have. And so they don't even know what to expect or what the flags are to look for, whether it's a green flag, a yellow flag, or a red flag, it doesn't matter. We don't always know what those flags look like. And so trying to the perspective I always took whenever I was a teaching assistant was, how do I wish somebody had taught it to me? And that's how the perspective I taught it to my students was, this is what I wish somebody had done, had sat down and just taught me how to think about this process. I taught assembly language in college, and that's one of the hardest coding languages to do because it's so simplified and you have to really break down a problem into the bare minimum things. And so how do you take a very high level complex problem and then break it down into something that you can actually work with? And so that was probably the best both teaching experience but also learning experience for me, is like, okay, this can apply to so many other things. It's like, I've got this big problem here. Surely I'm not the only person here, and I can talk to any number of my professors who I trust. I can talk to Megan, who was my mentor at the time. There's all these opportunities, and so I just had to actually go out and seek them. But a lot of times I didn't have to go that far because my professors would reach out to me.
So a couple of things I want to build on what you said. So first of all, whether you know it or not, you're actually citing the literature around attribution theory. And so the research tells us that more often than not, women have been gendered, meaning they've been taught to have these ideas. It's part of an external form of oppression, whether we recognize it or not, to actually internalize failures as slights against our fullest capacity. Whereas men are more likely to say, like, it's an external event, like the teacher didn't like me, whereas a woman is more likely to say, like, I'm terrible at math, I made a 98, right? Now that seems hyperbolic, but it's actually from the literature. And so it's what we call attribution theory, that women are more likely to attribute failures to their internal identities, whether men are more likely to externalize those things. So why I offer that is that's an important thing that I teach when working with educators, is to recognize that there are gendered differences and how many of us have been raised. And so when we learn to recognize those things, we can help mentor and address students who we see might be pulling into that sort of ideology of, like, I'm not good at this because I made a 98 or 96, or as Chauncey is saying, I'm struggling in this class. That must mean I shouldn't be an engineer, because there are a million other messages in the world that are telling us that we shouldn't be engineers as women, as people of color experience. And so we have to help counterbalance some of those messages that people are receiving. Mary, what are you thinking?
Building on that when you're the only in the room, whether it's a person of color or female, that you feel the pressure to prove yourself that much more and not show weakness, or that you don't know, or are struggling with something. So internalizing that it must be something I'm not doing right versus something isn't wrong, or I don't have enough information or the right awareness of what's available that could help resolve this. And finding a buddy that can help be a sounding board or an advocate, or that can give you some perspective of if it's something that you need to work on yourself to persevere and do more of those math problems to understand that type of math, or if it's you know, getting more expert knowledge that these other tools and resources are available to you to help make this situation a lot easier. And what else could you be missing? But it's not, if you're internalizing it because you're the only and you need to not show weakness in that environment, finding in environments where you can have that psychological safety to learn and grow and be okay to fail.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So what you've just described is another theory from the literature that we call stereotype threat. So it's the risk of confirming a stereotype about yourself, and it becomes a cognitive load that people from traditionally marginalized identities hold in spaces. And when I say cognitive load, that means it could be conscious or unconscious. So I'm quickly trying to pull up a comic strip here to show you an example of what stereotype threat means, because it's that risk of confirming. If there's a stereotype that says that women aren't engineers for any number of stereotypes that exist, then when we are the only, I remember being the only female in a class full of 70 men in an engineering class. And I'm in a program called Women in Engineering. I'm astutely aware that I am special and that there aren't many of us. And now the whole weight of the world is on my shoulders. And like, if somehow I don't perform, then do I validate all of that stereotypes that says that women don't become engineers? And so what we don't recognize is that that's a truly heavy burden that actually reduces performance in a space. So if you're interested in reading more about that, you can read, there's a great book called Whistling Vivaldi by Claude Steele and Joshua Aronson. And I think I've just about got this this cartoon pulled up. I really want to show it to you because it's one of my favorites. It's a Jorge Chan comic. Let's see. Here we go. Slideshow. Let's go back to here. So you'll see when it loads, if it loads. I wonder why it's so slow. Anybody else want to contribute while I'm trying to get this?
So Megan, we talked a little bit about, I think, some of how this plays out maybe in an educational framework, but in an industry framework, employee resource groups, I'm a huge fan of them at Dow. It's a big part of our culture is our employee resource groups, which bring together, people who maybe have something in common, whether it's women, whether it's LGBT, whether it's people who are Black or Hispanic. But we also focus a lot on the ally side of things. And so it helps, it helps you feel like you're not the only, and it does give you that place where you can have those conversations about maybe where you have struggled in your career or in your STEM pursuits, but feeling like you're not only are you not the only one there, but you have this big group of allies as well. So I think employee resource groups have such a great place in that space.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, like attribution theory and stereotype threat aren't just things that happen in the classroom. Like these things persist with us. There's a very popularized term that has been debunked in the literature, but it's still popular, and that's the sort of notion of imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is something that many women have been led to believe is something that's wrong with them. But really all that is external systemic oppression that's told you don't belong so much that you actually begin to believe it. And it becomes this internalized oppression. I've got here on the screen the comic of the Jorge Cham, and so you see this sort of example of a girl in a class. She's thinking, wait a minute, I'm the only female in this class. The second box zooms in on her. It says, it's okay, no pressure, just be yourself, no pressure at all. I'm just. Then the next is, I'm only representing all of womankind. And then she has this sort of verbal screaming. And then her head falls on her desk, and the boys and men sitting next to her call her Ditz, a psycho. And then she's thinking, engineering 1, womankind 0. And if you've never experienced something like this, that might seem foreign, but I know when I first saw this, I was like, yeah, this completely describes my experience as a woman in engineering, and this sort of unconscious pressure that we face to perform and to represent within those spaces. And that can persist in industry, that can persist in any kind of workplace. And so I like that advice that you offered, Julie, to people to find those employee resource groups, because those help to facilitate belonging. It doesn't give any company a break to say we don't need to create and strive to create inclusive cultures, but those employee resource groups, or if you're on a college campus going to the Women in Engineering or the National Society of Black Engineers or whatever those groups are, those are designed to help you find and facilitate belonging within the space. So pardon me for going into educator mode here. I just want to connect and bring in some of the literature that helps us understand these concepts. So the last question that we had planned is, what strategies do you recommend for young innovators to develop grit and resilience in their pursuits? Oh, I got to switch back to the other slide deck. So what strategies do you recommend for young innovators to develop grit and resilience in their pursuits?
So Megan, I can start. So my passion is STEM education. I mean, I have my day job, but every chance I get, I go into the classroom, and I go to early elementary. I actually go into classrooms as young as pre-K to do STEM with them, because I think it's just so important that they get those positive experiences with STEM, you know, from the very beginning, and see it as something that they can do. But in terms of like, how can we develop them, you know, develop that resilience in them, and help them understand sort of the breadth of STEM, and that it's, you know, it's more than just making slime. There's going to be, you know, things that are hard and things that are fun. I do a lot of STEM challenges with them. And so that's that whole idea of, I build marshmallow and spaghetti towers, right? So I'm trying to build a tower, and it doesn't work, and it falls down, and I have to go back and re-engineer it and try it again. And so I think it's that whole idea of creating that safe space for them to innovate and fail and try again. And the younger that we can start that and kind of build those mental models for them, I think the better it is.
Yeah, I actually really love that, Julie, just in terms of making sure that you can fail early, so fail early and often, so that you know that it's just a part of life, and that you have to keep trying. That sometimes, like you said, there will be things that are easy for us, and there will be things that are a little bit more challenging. I would also like to add that focusing on your why, developing what your why is, like, why do you want to be an engineer, or why do you want to be in STEM, or whatever the field is, focusing on your why. And if your why isn't strong enough, then you need a new why. If your why isn't strong enough to keep you motivated, to keep you going back day after day, then you need a new why. And that's across, job sectors. I'm not talking about focusing on your job. I mean, focusing on what your why is, because you will take that why with you if you change companies, if you go to a new school, or whatever, as you go through classes. Like, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do, whether it's a personal, like some impact that you want to have, or experience that you've had that you're trying to get away from. It could be like life challenges, or it could be something that you want to contribute to the world. Whatever your why is, whatever your story is, focusing on that, to me, helps you with the grit. And knowing that everything doesn't come easy. And I do feel like um, we're kind of in a very challenging place within, I won't say within the United States, I speak from this context, because there are a lot of things. So we're in a more of a participation trophy, kind of like everybody gets a prize. And I think that doing that sometimes, or doing that most of the times, makes people think that they're going to win at everything, that there's going to be something for them, whether they did great or whether they didn't. And so it doesn't motivate you to keep going, and that I need to do something different. And I think that going into STEM fields, you have to understand that there's going to be failure, but you can get up and you can try again. And so that's where I am, and don't take it personal. So as you just talked about internalizing things, Megan, whereas, me and May say that it's the professor's fault and you're thinking about all the things you did wrong. I didn't wake up early, all of the things that you could have contributed to the problem. Like some of the things, like don't take it personal. The problem is the problem. And I need to focus on, my why for why I'm being here, for why I am doing this, and continue to pursue. I should say, continue to pursue, whatever it is that you are doing. And I think that to me, that's what's helpful, whether you are in college, whether you are early in your career, whether you are later in your career, your why can always help you. And like I said, if you've achieved that why, it's time for another why. Why are you still doing it? And things can change. I always tell people, you don't have to, we are not in the age where people get in one career and stay there for 40, 50 years. That doesn't happen anymore. So don't be afraid of change. You may work through 5 different jobs before it's all over. You may, like me, you may own your own company. You may do 5 or 6 things on the side, but focusing on that, your why. And I feel like my why, all the things that I do contribute to my why. I have several whys. So, if you need several, I think that that will help you in terms of your grit and perseverance.
I heard a really interesting goal setting perspective from my company for their professional women engineer group earlier that talked about some people have SMART goals and they have everything SMART, measurable, very engineering focused, linear, this, that, and everything else. And this other person was not that fixed in how she looked at the world. So she had an overarching principle of a North Star or your why and things that would align to helping you get there. But she didn't set specific goals, but did different things that worked towards that. So I know some people say that motivation comes after the doing of the thing. So building up grit and resilience is doing habits or taking actions that align with your overall end goal, and that you may not want to get up in the morning and solve engineering problems to be able to pass your EIT and PE test, but you're going to go do those problems and work through that to build that muscle of understanding how to tackle engineering problems and go further with that. The same goes with learning a sport, that there are things you should do because you enjoy doing it, not necessarily because you're good at doing that. And a lot of times we stop prematurely because we're not good at something from the start. But if it's really a passion for you, making the opportunity to keep working through that failure and those challenges to get to where your why and your purpose and your end goals are with that are important to build the habits to help even when the motivation's not there, like getting up in the morning and writing if you're an author, or getting up and shooting baskets, because I guess Michael Jordan didn't even make his junior high basketball team, but obviously he did okay at basketball. So
Thanks so
so
much.
do the habits that get you there. Go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
Do the Habits. Yes, I love it. Atomic Habits is one of my favorite books. Okay, so we have one question from the audience, and then that's going to close us out for the hour. And that question is, from your experiences, could you share any tips for coaching employees that may avoid conflict and not be willing to fight for their ideas? Julie?
Sure. So, this is hard, right? We are, as individuals, we are typically conflict averse, right? And one of the things that we do in Dow is we attempt to help people come up with some conversation models for having those types of conversations. The way you get better at handling conflict situations is unfortunately to practice, and that's really hard, right? Especially if it's a true conflict situation. So we have some of our talent development events have these planned safe space interactions where you can practice conflict resolution. One of my favorite conversation models that we teach is the what, so what, now what model. So, start with the what, factually state what the problem is. You were showing up, or I observed that you haven't been showing up to meetings on time. And then, what's the so what about it? Because of that, we are not able to get through the full agenda of the meeting. And so this is frustrating to the rest of the participants. And then the now what? How should we go forward from this? Can we find a different time to hold this meeting that works better with your schedule? So using, just those little discussion models, conversation models in your head helps with people who may be struggling with the idea of how do I approach this conflict situation?
Julie, thanks so much. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to thank our panelists, Julie, Chauncey, Mary, and Lauren. And Lauren had to step out for another work thing, so that's why she disappeared briefly. But I'm so grateful for you all for taking some time to talk with us today and to share your experiences and your stories. I want to encourage all of you participants to join us next week. So we have the third in the series. Next week, we're going to be talking about collaborative problem solving, team dynamics, and design thinking in STEM. And we've got another great lineup of panelists, including a couple of my colleagues from grad school. I've got Catalina is a friend from my master's degree, and Erica and I met through the sort of sphere of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as with Shioshi. And so I encourage all of you to join us. If you're unable to participate in any of these events, we are going to have the recording. So because you've signed up, we're going to send you an email to let you know that the recordings are available. And so with that, again, I'm so grateful for your time. I'm so grateful for your participating. And again, thank you to our sponsor, the Bossier Parish Community College, for their grant that allowed us and allowed this event and this series to happen. So with that, I will close, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, y'all.